Okay. So go ahead and fire up your Carlson. And let's just start a blank drawing, a new drawing. And I'll show you a little bit. Yeah, just take all the defaults.
Now here's where I here's where I get messed up too. Starting a new drawing.
Okay.
All right, we're going to set. Okay. Again, my thoughts were try to go with a standard scale on a drawing and then modify it later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so go with 1 to 30.
All right.
We're gonna set. Now, here's where I always get messed up. We just call this just a test, or
Yeah, just whatever you want to call it. And you see the line above there where it says folder, that's the folder it's going to go to unless you change locations.
that's where I have problems. So let's call this test 072722.
All right.
Okay. And then we go up here. Now, how do I change this?
All right. Now, when you pull that down, go ahead and click on that. No, go back to the set button. Go to set at the top. Okay. Now, right up there at the top where it says, yeah, right there. If you click that, that's a pull down. Excuse me. And it only has in it the last couple of ones where you were working or
Okay.
when you start the program. So that's not going to be the way to go. We're going to need to browse to a different location. Now there's two things here. And let me show you on with my mouse. This little button right here, that is to go up a level. So if I go up to Carlson projects, over here in this side are all the folders that are in Carlson projects. Okay.
Okay, but this is a new one.
All right. So if we want to make a new folder, then what we would do is we need to go, this browse button actually bypasses this for a minute and puts you out into the Windows file manager.
Okay.
So, and that can be like this. So we can go wherever you want to be. Now
We're on D.
Carlson projects. And if we want a new folder, we'll right click the blank space and say new folder. And we can call that, let's call it Carlson training. Okay, so now we have a Carlson training folder.
Okay.
We open that. We can even do a new one here and call that one 072722 with Ken if you want.
Yeah.
All right, so let's say that's where it's going to be. So I'm going to double click and I'm now sitting in that folder and I could type the file name here. Again, whatever you wanted to call it, or if I just say, if I say save at this point, doesn't say because there's no file name. So I need to give it that, whatever that name was that you typed earlier. Go ahead and type that in.
Okay.
No, wait a minute. We need to go to browse. Go to our Carlson training with Ken. Now right here, type a file name and then hit the save button over on the right. There you go.
And save. Okay.
Now, so what it's done, you see up at the top now, you're sitting in that folder.
Uh-huh.
And it's put the file name that you typed into the Carlson dialog. So now at this point, you hit save again so that Carlson now is aware of it. Okay, so now you've got it set and it's in the folder that you want it to be in. All right.
Okay.
Now, a couple things here. Whenever you put in a scale, whether it's 30, 50, 100, whatever, let's say if we're at 30 scale, if you look at the symbol plot size, you got a number here.
Mm-hmm.
got a number over here. Same thing for the text, okay? And so what this does is when you ever, in any of the dialogues throughout the whole program, when you're looking for sizes of text and symbols, you'll see this word symbol plot size or text plot size, or sometimes you'll see symbol scalar size or text scalar size. Whenever you see those, what you're going to say to yourself is, when I plot, if I plot this drawing at whatever scale this is, that's how many plotted inches the symbols will be and the text will be. So at 30 scale, if I want 1/10 of an inch tall text, 0.1 inches, that's going to be 3 drawing units. So if I were to change this, say to 50 and hit tab to go out of it, now you see over here, it's automatically changed that to be 5 because it knows that 0.1 times 50 is 5. Same thing here, 0.1 times 50 is 5. You know,
Okay.
and sometimes, you know, like some people like to do text size as being 0.08 instead of 0.1, like a Leroy 80, an L80.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that means that's 4 and 5 for the symbols. And again, if you say 30, you don't ever have to change these if they're like the way you like them after you set them the first time. They'll stick, but it always recomputes this. Okay. And
Okay.
this is the crux of what you're trying to do. Because when you make any kind of text, if you're not using what we're going to go over today, this annotative scaling, then when you run the Carlson command, it takes whatever scale you have in play at that moment, and it generates symbols and text at this plotted inches if you plot it at that scale. And it knows to make it 3 drawing units tall or 2.4 drawing units tall. Okay. So these numbers here, the plot size, symbol plot, text plot sizes, plotted inches. These other, when it says drawing units, that's the, you know, what you would normally have to tell AutoCAD or IntelliCAD what size to make the text. Okay, because
Okay.
he doesn't know anything about scale. Carlson does. All right.
Okay.
So that is what that is. Now you understand the projection for state planes and all that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so go ahead and hit next. And then you can leave that. It just automatically starts you off with a coordinate file of the same name as the drawing, and you're aware that that can be a different file, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead and set next for that, and we're into our drawing. Now, let's put in a couple of points. Let's go up to the points menu and just draw locate points. And your choice, you can choose whatever symbol you want.
Stay with what we got.
Okay, now notice right here, the symbol size scalar. There's your
Yeah.
0.1, and there's your 0.08. Remember, I changed that text down a little bit just so you
Yeah.
see the difference. All right, so that part you don't have to change. So let's go ahead and say either screen pick, or you can type in coordinates, however you want to do it. Just put in 2 or 3 points. And now I don't see your command prompt. Is it?
It's on a different screen. Let me bring it back.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
wrong one. Wrong one.
no. Yeah, that's your properties. We're going to need to see those from time to time anyway, so you might as well leave this one up here. So
Okay.
let's take this over
Go
here
ahead.
and just we'll dock it fixed to the right. And let's turn this off and shrink it up a little bit. We'll just keep that there all the time. All right. Now your command window. Well, you gotta turn it back on now. I think you just turned it off. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
now drag it over and then dock it down at the bottom.
Okay.
Just, well, let's take it and dock it.
Okay.
So I'm going to see that button right there?
Mhm.
So that puts it down there. Now I'm going to make it so we've only got about 3 lines or so that we can see. There we go. That's good.
Okay.
All right. Now you can do those the way you're used to doing them on your other monitor just for today's purpose. So I
Okay.
want all right. So now we've got these 3 points. They're rather tiny for what we're looking at now, but they're probably very far apart. So if I were to zoom in down here, all right, so there's point number 3. Let's and you see how that circle looks sort of like a stop sign?
Mhm.
That is so if I do a regen or a regen all, it goes back to being a circle.
Okay.
That's done from what's called the display list processing. And there's a
Mhm.
variable called view res that controls this. And if I say yes, and right now it can go anywhere from 1 to 20,000. And when it's set really low, like it is now, you're going to, the screen will display quicker, but it makes circles into those segmented pieces when you zoom in too tight.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
the reason that was done was years ago, the graphics processors were really slow and they had to find a little cheat way to make it appear faster.
Mhm.
If I put it up to its maximum, now you'll be able to zoom all the way back out and then zoom in and it still looks round. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So now let's do a couple of other things here just so you get some more things. Let me put this at say 100 and I'll put that to 2 and I'm going to give this a sample point and I'll copy that and paste it here. All right, so there's now the point number, the elevation, and the description.
Okay.
If I do that, same thing for this one here.
Should we move my points closer together?
No, it's all right for now.
Okay.
We'll do the same thing here. We'll call this one test point. And the same thing here. Oops. And let's give that an elevation 99.99. And then finally up here, we'll call it another point. Now let me also illustrate another thing, and I'll just call this one additional point, ADDL underscore PT, but the drawing is going to say another point. Now there's a reason I wanted to show you that is when I look at this point, oops, I didn't give it an elevation. Make that one 101. So if I were to use field to finish, for instance, with Serve CE,
Mhm.
I could have a code that says when you see a point that says ADDL underscore PT, I want you to read that. And instead of drawing it in the drawing with ADDL underscore PT, I want you to type out another space POINT. So another point. So any given Carlson point can have both a drawing description and a coordinate file description. Okay, they can be different. Most of the time they're the same unless you do something like I just did there with an edit, or if you use something like field to finish to substitute one description for another. Okay. So
Okay.
there's another thing that you might want to be aware of, like if, I don't know, let's say if this was, let's change that instead, we'll call it a IPF, and in the drawing, we'll call it iron pen. Well, let's go ahead and spell it out, iron pen found, all right. So sometimes, like if you're drawing a plat and you've got, these points, if you're going to use the symbols and the descriptions on your drawing, you might not want your letter O to look like a square. You
Mhm.
might want a different font. Well, that's controlled with a particular text style that you can get to under the draw text menu. And this is set style. You can do it there, or if you just click this thing, what everybody thinks all it does is work the layers, this button right here. That also has, now bring that over to this screen. It's on another screen, I'm guessing. There you go. You don't have to dock it, but that's all right if you do, that's fine. So instead of just being, let me drag this down a little bit, yeah. Instead of just being a list of layers, which it is when it first comes up, notice it also has all of these different things that are settings in your drawing.
Okay.
Blocks, you've got dimensions, styles, groups, any external references. So one of the things is this text styles, and there's always one called standard. Okay, and let me make these a little smaller. See the whole, there we go. All right, and you can see the font name that this style uses. So a style called standard for text is going to use an Arial font. Okay. But when you do a draw locate points like you did for those 3 points, it creates, if it doesn't already exist, a text style called PTXT for point text. And it assigns it this font name called TXT, and it's a shape file. But it can be anything you want. So if we wanted to make that say something like, say Calibri Light, see how it changes the way that looks?
Yeah.
Okay, so the way to have that always work that way is if you use a particular drawing template to start off a drawing, is you open up that drawing template, create a style called PTXT in that template, then save it back as a drawing template. So then the next time you use it, it will always be defined for you. Of course, you can always, any drawing, you can bring this up and come down here to text styles and change it here. Now, there's a couple of things that we see that are unchecked, like annotative and the height and paper text height. Right now, they're not turned on, and that's the way you want to do it most of the time. You're going to want to leave those things undone, but no, that annotated part is going to come into what we're doing today. So let's look at the other way that that command is done through the draw text set style. And this is the same way. We've got standard and PTXT, and you see the font name is here where you can do all of that stuff that I did in that other thing over here with the layer control.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to make a couple of new styles. One I'm going to call let's just call it Anno text. And I'll make another new one called non-Anno. text. All right. Now, let's go back to Annotext and let's change its font to be, oh, let's make it Cambria is fine. We'll take a look at it. Like I said, you can make it anything you want as far as the font name. And we're going to click on annotative. And that means that when you choose that as a text style, it becomes annotative text. We'll see what that means in a minute. Now, if you have it set to annotative, it wants to know what paper text height you want that to be. So that means when you go to plot it, no matter what scale you're plotting, you're drawing at, but you want that, once you're on that paper size, it's going to always rescale, rechange, change that text height to match whatever the annotative scaling happens to be. All right. But if you set it to say, say a 1/4 inch, say point, and these are in paper units, so 0.25 inches. If you give it a number here that is not 0, that anytime you use that text style called annotext, it's all going to be that size. You can't ever change it. So if you just leave it as 0, you can change it and make one word. You can say, make them all to be a 1/4 inch. You can make the other ones be 1/10 of an inch, whatever. Okay, the same thing for that one. I'll leave this one as Cambria annotative. I'll apply that. And let's look at the non-annotext. And let's make this one, let's get something goofy. All right, well, not quite that goofy. Let me see, Franklin. There we go, just use Franklin Gothic. But I'm not going to make it annotative. So watch how this word changes, paper text height or fixed height. Again, if you make that a particularly, a defined non-zero height, then every time you type text in using that style, it's going to always be that number of ground units, drawing units tall. So that part stays the same. So if you leave them as 0, you can change them. And likewise, if you were to do just a plain old text definition, or, just, if you just did a, let me put this, I'm going to sit on standard as my current. So if you just did a plain old draw text, just standard text. Okay, so right now, unless I change the style, which is on my prompt, it's going to use the current style, which I just set to standard just a minute ago. So if I click here, now I see it's asking me for the height that I want.
Okay.
So if and that is 3, I think if we're still at 30 scale, I don't know that we are or not till we check.
Yeah, we are. We didn't change it. We stayed at 30.
All right, so if we stay at 30, then that would be 1/10 of an inch on paper. So if I just take the default here and then the default rotation, and I put test text at 1 inch equals 30 feet to be 0.1 inches tall on paper. Quite a line of text. Okay.
Okay.
So now, if I were to plot this at 30 scale, and let's see my settings, drawing setup. See right there's my 30. Then that would be there. Now, if I repeat my command for text, detext, and if I click here, now it says, what's the text height? Well, if I said 5, rotation angle, I'm going to say test, a little bigger.
Okay.
So they have properties. I select this one. I look in the properties over here and I see its height. It's in drawing units. I select this one, look over here. It's got a height of 5 drawing units.
Okay. All
If
right.
I had a style, let's go back to this set style. And I'm going to make a new one called fixed height non-anno. And we'll just keep it Arial. And so it's not annotated, but if I said 3 as a text height. All right, so now that should be my current text height. And if I do a draw text standard, if I click here, now remember last time it asked me for the height.
Yeah.
This time it's not asking me for that because I defined it with a height. So I hit enter and now I would type this is at height 3 drawing units. And you can see that it is, say, that same height as that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so same thing, if it were annotative, it would ask me for it would not ask me for a paper text height. So that's the difference in defining heights, which you can also see here under text styles, this fixed height, non-annotative. See, it has that fixed number, okay?
Yeah.
So, but now if I select it, notice it has a text height, but you can always change it. So I just changed that to 5. So right there, but it doesn't prompt me for a height when I create it. You can always go and change them if you want to. So that doesn't restrict it to that. It just pre-defaults it to that. All right. So now let me there we go. Style, fixed height. All right, so that's what that is. Oops, and being an anal retentive engineer, I noticed that and had to fix it. All right, so that's a little bit about some text that we've so far been using non-annotative text heights. Now here's where it's going to get interesting. We're going to use annotative text heights, and even these pieces of text here, any of them, as a property, notice it has a question for it right here, whether or not it's annotative. So even though the style that I used was not annotative, I could make it annotative, but I have to select it and make it annotative in its properties at least once to do that. So the reason we want to talk about using styles that we create to be annotative is because when you do something like an annotate, let's just say a bearing and distance, let's just say points 1 to 2. There it is. We didn't actually have the line drawn, but when we do that annotation, if I look at my annotate defaults, for angle, that's the bearing and distance. I see right here, first of all, this is the style it's going to use. And it's going to set the height, the text size to be 1/10. And then there's the line type scaler as well. But, so whatever we set this, it's going to read that style and create that text along what would have been that line 1 to 2. Okay, based on what this answer is. So it takes that number and it feeds it to IntelliCAD as part of the text command to answer the question of what height do you want? Okay, so that's where it gets that information. Now, even though you have set your default text style here, text plot size is 0.08, any command that has defaults here this is going to always take precedence. So you could even, when you drew those points, draw locate points, even though it's reading the defaults here of 0.1 and 0.08, if you change this one to be, 0.5 text, and let's say I just screen picked a point here and I called that one really big labels. Point number 4. Okay, so you see what it did is that would override this setting. So what I'm doing, well, actually it goes up here and changes it for that one. So I'll change it back. All right, so that one, like I said, in the dialog boxes and in the commands, and if I do, let's say, if I were to do an area by, if you're plotting an area, your square feet and your acres, if I look at this one, if I edit that, I see again, I've got text size scaler. So every time it reads a command that creates text, it's going to get this answer from this, from the dialogue. Okay, so again, this one is just setting defaults. And that populates certain commands like draw locate point. You see, it's put it back to 0.08. I had it as 0.5 for this big one. And now this particular one, the draw locate points, actually has a link back to this, and it changes this for you. The other commands, these annotation commands, don't do that. But any of those commands will read this number and create the text at that size, at the scale you are using, okay? So now, we'll go ahead and just get rid of this point here. So I'll delete that one. Now, remember, all I did was delete this out of the drawing. It's still in, actually, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to list them. So it's still in, sorry, list points. There we go. Now let's do them all. Oh, it's over on your other screen. That's why I can't see it. Okay. So it's still got 4 points. You don't need to drag it over. I don't need to see it, but let's see. Well, you need to close that list box off and come back to the command prompt. There we go. Now, so these are non-annotative, and they will always stay the size that that they'll stay the size that they are when they're created, and they're created at the right size for this drawing scale. But now let's say I needed to make my drawing a different scale. If I need to make a 100 scale drawing, well, if you've labeled a bunch of stuff, you got to go back and select the text and change it from 3, or in this case, that was a 5. Let's use the 3 here. So there's my 1/10 of an inch text at 3. So if I'm at 100, I need to make that 10. Okay, so I'd have to do that for every piece of text that I've drawn. And my points, I'd have to go back to say points, scale or resize my point attributes. And I can do it based on a scale, or I can type A for absolute, and just give it the numbers that I wanted to see. And I had to constantly be aware of what scale I needed it to be. Okay, so if I were to do this, let's change our drawing setup. And I'm going to change it from 30 scale to, say, 10 scale. And now if I draw located points, and we'll just screen pick here. And this is point at 1 inch equals 10 feet. Point number 5. So now, so there's that one, and you can see that it's smaller, but at a 1/10, or at 1 inch equals 50 feet, which is what we set this to be, or I'm sorry, 1 inch equals 10 feet, that is still, in this case, it's going to be, what is that, 0.1 times 10 should be 1 inch tall. So if I draw a, let's do my text. Do a draw standard text, and there's your text size scaler again. If I put it as 0.08, using standard will be fine. And we'll use that default text. I'll just put it right there with no rotation. Well, it read my mouse for a rotation. Let's make its rotation east. There we go. So now this text is exactly the same height as that text there, you see.
Yeah.
And if I look at its properties over here, I see that it's 0.8 drawing units tall because I'm at 1 inch equals 10 feet. And I set my text size scalar, I kept it at a 1/10 of an inch. So a 1/10 of an inch at 1 inch equals 10 feet. Well, 800ths rather, not a 1/10. So that's 0.8. If it were a 1/10, it would be 1. Okay. So that's how all your sizing works. And that's why it's always so frustrating when you're doing you're changing scales, and now you have to go back and change everything or redraw everything. Okay. Oh, one of the things I wanted to tell you about these points, by the way, when you create a plat, do you use your points and your point descriptions as part of your plat? You throw them away and draw symbols and labels?
Draw symbols and labels most of the time.
Charlie?
Yeah.
You still,
Ken?
I can't hear you.
Ken?
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I may have accidentally hit the mute button on yours. So sorry about that. So now,
yeah, my final plat, I usually just add it manually.
okay, so you don't actually include your Carlson points in your plats. That's
not the finished plat. In a work plat, yeah, but not in the finished plat.
Okay, well, that's fine. So the same rule, I was gonna say, some people do, and you can reposition these, to different places and then freeze these kind of things. If that were, let's say this could be somewhere up like that, then if I froze these two layers, this would be left and the symbol would be left. But, that's just a choice of how you want to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine the way you're doing it now. Let's do some lines here. I'm just going to do whoops. 5. What I should have done. There we go. And I don't need that anymore. So now, that being said, and let's make sure our current style is set to text style will be a, let's say non-annotative text. That would be my current text style. And I'm going to go to my annotate defaults, and we'll just keep it a 10th for my text style. And for my text style here, I'm going to use this non-anno text. Same thing for distance, non-anno text. And now, one thing to keep in mind, by the way, is if this stuff sticks, so the next time you run the command, it'll still be there from the last thing you set. And if your drawing doesn't have that text style created, it will create it for you as a copy of whatever the current text style is. So you can always go and change those later.
Okay.
We'll just set those as our defaults. Make sure our sizes, there's a 10th. All right. And so now if we annotate, let's just do the old bearing and distance across the top. We'll choose, oh, sorry, line work. And I'll choose that. Now there's our label. And if we look at that text properties over here, its height is 1. That's 1/10 of an inch at 1 inch equals 10 feet. Okay. But if I were to, now, do you use paper space layouts?
No, I'm trying to learn how to use it, but I'm still fumbling.
Okay. I'll show you a bit of this real quickly. I won't take up a whole lot of your time to do it right now. Is to explain the nuances, but you'll see it in the recording and all that. So I'm going to set the printer here to PDF. Right here, let's see. Drawing to PDF, that's what I want there. And I'm going to use what size paper do you normally use?
11 by 17, but that printer's down right now waiting for ink.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to make a PDF size anyway.
Okay. Okay.
So I'll just use an ANSI 11 by 17. That'll be fine. That's okay. Let's see. I'll set up just a monochrome so everything's in black and white. All right. And I'll close that, and I'll rename this to be 11 by 17 sheet. And of course, you can have all kinds of things on it.
Mhm.
I'm going to make a layer called viewports. I'm going to give it this, I'm going to give it a color of just something arbitrary, 241. And I'm going to come back to this 11 by 17. I'm going to modify that again. And instead of this just monochrome, I'm going to call this one on your other screen. Can you drag that over?
There's nothing on my other screen.
There's not a little dialogue for a plot style.
Let me close this. Close that. Close that. No.
All right, let me see here a second.
I have an add print style table.
Yeah, that one. Drag that over. All right, there we go. So I'm going to call this one general plots. And that's fine. All right, so I'm going to make all my colors through 249. I'll get that one. Go back up here, shift click that one. And I'm going to make those to be black. And then color 241, which is the one I chose for a minute. I'm going to make that one red. And I'm doing that for a specific reason here. Because I want this, which you see over here in the properties, it is a viewport.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put that on a layer that I just created called viewports. And it was set to be that color 241. And I also want to check right here that I want to display these print styles. So now it will be red. So that lets me know that's a viewport. Now a viewport is just a view into the model of the drawing. And it can be as big or as small as you want it. I'll show you that here in just a second. And it also has a particular scale. Now, if I'm in it, I double click in it. Notice the cursor is like it is in model space.
Mm-hmm.
But here in the paper space, it disappears until I double click outside of it. But when it first gets created, and if I double click in it, now if I roll the wheel, see how the drawing changes scale just like you're in model space?
Yeah.
If I double click out here and I roll the wheel, it's the paper that's changing how close I am to the paper. So what you want to do when you plot your drawings is you want your main viewport. You're going to come over here on the properties and you're going to set it to a particular size. And that's going to be, you know, that 1 inch equals 10 feet. The 1 to 10.
Okay.
Is what we had. The 1 inch equals 10 feet. I don't like the way they do that as a ratio because it works. We call it 1 to 10. It's not really 1 to 10. It's 1 to 120 as a ratio. 1 inch equals 120 inches. It's 1 inch equals 10 feet, but AutoCAD does it this way. It reads 1 paper unit colon however many drawing units. So in that case, it really is 1 inch equals 10 feet or 10 drawing units, but it doesn't label it exactly right. But we'll leave it as 1 to 10. So now, if this were scaled to be 1 to 10, everything's going to scale correctly. Now, I'm going to double click back inside it and pan this a little bit just so we can look at this area. I'll double click outside of it. I'll select the viewport. And now this is the important part, the display locked. Yes or no. So if it's yes, if it's locked, now when I double click in it, and if I zoom in, see, it temporarily switches me back to paper space and lets me zoom in without changing the scale of the drawing, like you saw it. If I were to select it, unlock it, and now if I double click in it and zoom in and out, you see what it's doing? So once you have it set, right here, it's at 1 to 10. We want to, and you have it positioned where you want it, then we want to lock it, the display locked, okay? And that can also be done by double clicking this little padlock down here at the bottom, right down here.
Okay.
All right. So now,
If I print this right now, it's going to just show what's on the screen at 11 by 17.
correct. If in
Okay.
fact, if you were to print it, it will make a PDF, and that would be an 11. Or I'm sorry, it would be 11 by 17. It's like
Mhm.
it's like two 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper side by
Right.
side.
Right.
So now if I zoom in here, and if I stay out here in the paper space, and I zoom in here, and if I want to see how tall that text is, I'm going to type a command called dist or distance, and I'm just going to get down here beside it and click, from there up to there. And that should be, what do you think? If we typed that at 0.1 text plot size.
Should be 0.1.
Yeah, see there? And
Yeah. Okay.
okay, now this gets into it, what's going to happen when we're using this annotation. So now if I double click here, and if I select that text, and over here where it says annotated, I could change that to yes, or let's go ahead and pull this down and choose that it is annotated text. We'll use that different style. And we need to tell it that it is annotative right now. And the annotation scale, see down here, the paper text height.
Yeah.
So we need to set the right scale. So the annotation scale, we want to be 1 to 10 to match what that is. Right now it's 1 to 1. So we're going to set this up. I'll choose that 1 to 10 like we had before. And I'll just delete that one and say, okay. I'll also take this, make sure that the annotation scale for this matches that 1 to 10. There's that standard scale, annotation scale. Now, when I select this text this time, see it has a paper text height of a full inch, right? But
Mhm.
we want it to be 1/10 of an inch. So now it's back down to where it's supposed to be.
Okay.
At 1 inch equals 10 feet. Now, notice when I select it, you see this over here, this ghosted view of that
Mhm.
text. That is a setting, excuse me, that is, it's set to pre-select, and all it really does is get in the way, but what it will do is, if you've got this already set up for multiple scaling and such, then it will show you all the different positions and all the defined scalings that you have declared in here throughout the life of the drawing. So it's not, in my opinion, very useful other than to confuse things. So the command, and this is probably something you want to take a note of, there's a setting that we need to set, and it is called let's see, not anno select, but is select anno display. And if you see what that is, what that says is that this determines whether annotative entities like this text, when selected, display briefly in other scales. The default is that it does do that. But like I said, that gets confusing. And that's what a lot of people don't use annotative text because that's too much of a problem for them. So I would suggest that we set that to be off. And now I think that will stay even if you go out of AutoCAD and come back, or IntelliCAD and come back into it. But if not, write this down on your notes there. You want to make sure you check this thing called selection anno display and turn it off.
Okay.
All right. Now, down here on the status bar, there's a couple of buttons. There's one here called toggle your annotation visibility on and off. And the next one is to toggle automatic annotation on and off. I'm going to turn those on for you. And you want to double click those to turn them on to make sure that they are on.
Okay.
All right. So now we have that set. If I select this, I look at it and I see that has a text height of 0.1. Now let's change something here. We're going to select our viewport and change its scale. Instead of 1 to 10, let's make it 1 to 20. So that gets smaller, right? But so the annotation scale, I want to also set that to 1 to 20. All right, so that's done. So, but the text got smaller. Why? And if I select it, I see that it has a paper text height. It still says 0.1. It should be, but it also has this annotation scale set to 1 to 10. So I need to add this 1 to 20. Okay, so now there it is. And if you look at it, if we make this, I'm going to change it again, and let's make it 1 to 5. All right, so we've zoomed way in on it. It's set the standard scale when I set the annotation scale. And if I select this object, it's annotation, I'm going to select this and add that 1 to 5. So now it's still, if I click, see, it's still a 10th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that would be the same size text no matter what. So if I then change, because that has now had, this now has annotation scaling set for 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 20. Okay, so what happens was because I created that with a style that was not annotative at the time. So it's not inheriting these things. But when we use that, I'll show you that in the next example here, is it will always change. So if I select our viewport, we're now at 1 to 5. Well, let's change that back to 1 to 20. Now keep your eye on the size of the text. So see how it stays the same?
Mm-hmm.
And now if I make it 1 to 10, see the text stays that same size. The other text, of course, doesn't. You see how these labels get smaller
Mm-hmm.
or bigger if I go up here to 1 to 5. So see, but this one always stays the same. Now, here's something that you can do with annotative text. Is let's say at 1 to 5, I wanted to move this because it's annotative. I'm going to move it down here next to the 1. Okay. Now I'm going to make this 1 to 10. And I'm going to now go back and grab this and move it up here to the middle. I'll change this now to 1 to 20. And for 1 to 20, you can even do something like this. We move that from where it is there. Oops, let's see, it's move. Let's say I'm going to move it up to here, and I could even change its rotation. Be something like that. Now watch. That's at 1 to 20. If I go to 1 to 5, see it's back. Well, that's supposed to be back down there where it was. 1 to 10. All right, let's put 1 to 10 down here. And when it is 1 to 20, was that one? 1 to 5. Whoops, sorry. Hang on a second. I'll put this down here on this end. All right, so 1 to 5. It's down here by the 1 on the top. 1 to 10. See, that's supposed to stay put where it was. 1 to 20. Huh. Well, it's moving around here. The rotation held, but the position didn't. That's actually not supposed to be happening. If I'm going to go back to model space here, and let's change that to 1 to 5. All right, and then let's change that to 1 to 10. You see something here, model. Paper text height. And then 1 to 20. All right, so 1 to 20, 1 to 5. See, it's going, it's positioning that insert point right up here. See something. Turn this on for a second. So and 1 to 5. This may be. This may be a reason to leave that variable alone. I'll have to try one more thing here. Yeah, all right, so now, see, when I select this text, you see those two ghosted positions?
Yeah.
The one was the 1 to 10, the other was the 1 to 5, and there's the 1 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
And if I select, if I come down here and I'm going to double click this little button down here and go to 1 to 5, there it is. My 1 to 10 is right there. And my 1 to 20 is right there. So what I'm getting at is you can set your scale. And if you've got this text as an annotative object, you move it around in the scale you're defined at, and that's where that version of it lives. And it shows up here. I'm in the one that's the actual text, which is at my scale 1 to 20, but it also shows you these other positions. Now, so if I go back to here and change these, there's my 1 to 20. Here's my 1 to 5. And here's my 1 to 10. Okay. So you get a sense of this capability, and you can see that with all these different scales. Now, that was that command or the variable called selection anno display. And if I don't have that on, let's see, turn it back on. So if it's off and I select it, I don't get those other previews, even though it has all three scales.
Okay.
So to get it to, now notice the rotation changed, but the positioning did not, it didn't honor, it didn't keep it. It kept pushing these other two positions. It pushed it up here where this one was. So we might have to leave that on. I'll have to do some more testing because AutoCAD doesn't work that way. AutoCAD, you can leave that off and you can do those positionings and it will keep these, where they are. But for now, if we just get those like that, it will work accordingly. Now, let's do, what was the other point down here? Was this 2? No, 3. All right, so if we do annotate, look at our defaults, and let's choose our style to be anno text. So it's automatically going to be an annotative text style. Because we defined the style to be annotated. And let's draw. The line was 1 to 3. Yeah. Okay, so now we annotate bearing and distance. There it is. We select it. We see it has a height of 1 because I wanted it to be 1/10 of an inch. And my settings, I am at 10 scale. So it has a ground distance height at 1. Okay. But even though it has a style of anno text, now why did that not stay? You know what happened is I unchecked it when I did the style example.
Uh-huh.
I'd unchecked it and forgot to check it back on. Now, let's try that again. I've turned it on now. So now the angle distance, bearing distance. Did I get it? Yeah. All right, so now there it is. And if I select it, it's still not. Let me see. No, it's supposed to be annotated. Let's see something here. Enter text, back to orientation, so it'll flip if it needs to. Turn that off a minute, leave that alone. All right, so this should have so paper text height should be 0.1. So I'm at, let's see, undo that. All right, so right now my scale is set in my drawing setup, 1 inch equals 10. But if you look down here on the bottom of the status bar, see that little button of the scale and it says 1 to 20?
Uh-huh.
That needed to have been set to the same.
Okay.
All right, so what happens? See, this won't change this, at least not in this version. But if I change this from 1 inch equals 10, let's say if I go to 30 scale now. Yeah, then I have to come down here and change this to 30. Okay. Now it says 9 entities were updated to support annotation scale 1 to 30. And those were these things up here. So for 30, it's going to be a different location. And if I select that one and I look over here, my annotation scale now has 5, 10, 20, 30. Because all I have to do is change this scale number down here. And if something's annotation, because of this button right here, this one that I'm pointed and the mouse is pointing to, it says automatic annotation on and off.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is that if I set an annotation scale and something is defined as being annotative, and you can have annotative text, annotative blocks, some various things. So if I do that, it's going to automatically add that scale. So if I double click that again, let's change that to 50. Well, it did, there's 50. Now this one, because it was annotative, and I look at the scaling, I see I now have 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 20, 30, and 50. Okay, so this down here controls that. And if I toggle these off, for instance, so now my annotation visibility is off. So those little previews go away. My automatic annotation is off. So if I go now to, say, 100 scale, well, it changed that, but I've got the visibility is off. So I no longer see either one of those labels. But if I turn that back on, see how it pops back up there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I select it, you see it has a paper text height of a 10th. It has annotation scaling now of, well, it did not get the 100. Okay. Because even though I set this here, but this item over here was off. So that's why these two things need to stay on. So this one, I need to add that 1 to 100. Okay, so now it says a paper text of 1/10. And if I'm back here and if I select this and change its annotation scaling to 100, notice, see, it's still 1/10 of an inch tall. I go from, say, here up to there. There's your 10th. Okay, so that's how it's going to automatically change its size based on whatever scale you may change it to. But to do this with the Carlson commands, notice back, let's just go back to model space. Now, if I annotate well, I'm at 1 to 100 down there, but let me I'm at 1 to 100 down here on my status bar, but I haven't set my drawing setup to be 1 to 100. Now this is now linked in the new version of Carlson, so one changes the other. So now my bearing distance. All right, so there it is. 1/10 of an inch tall at 1 inch equals 100 feet. If I were to change now my drawing setup to be 1 inch equals 30 feet. And if I do a regen, nothing has changed here, even though I changed my scale up here, but I have to come down here and change this to 30. And now that one reacted, you see, this one did not, even though it was done in a text style called annotext, because when it creates it, it says, no, don't make it annotated. If I do make it annotative, and I'm going to give it a paper text height of 0.1, and then I can add, all these different ones if I want, or let's go ahead and move this a little closer for that one. So now I'm going to set this, I'll set all of these different ones. So there's the one for 5 scale. There's one for 10 scale. There's the one for 20 scale. Let's move that off the line a little bit. And then finally, let's see, we didn't do 30. There's 30. And then finally 100. And let's move this one even down here. All right. So now, anytime those scales change, over here in paper space, you saw how that all worked in here. So there's 100 scale. There's 50 scale, but of course it's off the page unless I'll make that 50. Let's put this up here so you can see. All right, there it is at 50. There it is at 5. Ten, 20.
Mhm.
50, we'll move that one down a little bit, and there, and then 100. So the takeaway on this is that even though you have this ability to have it automatically change and react based on the scaling. So there's 100. Let's go all the way up to 1 inch equals 5. See, it's, well, we can't see it, it's out of frame, but let's say 1 inch equals 10. Where's my 20? 50. So those texts are staying 1/10 of an inch tall. And I can reposition them based on where that was. I needed to move this. Ten, 20, 30. $50. $100. All right, so now these will react. Any of these changes. So even though, I've got a mechanism now to where the text stays the right size, you have to position let's see it. You may have to position the placement of that text for each of these different locations that you want them to be.
Okay.
All right. And even in paper space versus model space, see, you're going to have to, you'll have to jiggle them around, obviously, because when you're drawing text and your text size changes, it's going to be further off the line, that kind of stuff. So now,
Yeah.
But that was done, even though we used an annotative text style, when we did the Carlson command of annotate, see that, and that's a style, but it doesn't make it annotative. It still creates it as non-annotative text with that style, everything else about the style. So I had to manually change it. But there's a setting right here under Carlson configure. under general settings. It says right here, use annotated scale.
Uh-huh.
And if we turn that on, support all drawing scales and set annotated to drawing scale. And let's do that, say okay, and exit. Now, just select all of this stuff and get rid of it. So now when we set it to be annotative and we do our command, bearing distance. Oh, wait a minute, let me change first. Let's make our drawing setup back to 30. So 30. Now, did you see down here how it changed at the
Yeah.
bottom?
Yeah.
That was what that switch was right here in my Carlson configure. General settings, set annotative to the drawing scale.
Okay.
So if I change my scale up here, it will take care of this down here.
Okay.
However, if I change this down here, I don't know if it changes this or not. And it does not.
No. Okay.
So I would say change it up there and that will take care of changing it down there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now I'm at, let's go back to a 30 scale. And let's annotate bearing and distance. And might as well give it that one too. All right. And now you see all those different sizes
Yeah.
that light up? That's because in this setting, I said support all drawing scales. So that means it created little ghosted positions for every single one of these different scales.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so they're there. So no matter what scale you might set this to be, right now it's 20. We say 30, 50. Five, except I've moved off of it a little bit. Let's see. There we go. Lock that back. All right, so now so it's get that grip off of there. So if I look at it there at 1 to 30, make it 1 to 100. See that text stays the same size no matter what. And because I set in Carlson configure general settings and I said use annotated scale, because of that, this now, because it was created with an annotated text style, notice its properties have the annotation set to yes.
Uh-huh.
All right. So now there is a trade-off with this. I'm going to raise points. Now, Yeah, we still got 5 points. All right. So here's the trade-off. When I go to draw points, I'm going to draw locate points. I'll draw all. And you can't tell for 5, but because it's pretty quick. But if I had like several hundred points to draw,
Mhm.
it takes a little bit more time to process because it has to read that. Now that's at 1 to 30. So that's the right text size. Now, because that is annotative, it made it annotative. If I were to change this from 1 to 30 to be 1 to 5, why didn't ah let's see, select these. They are non-annotative. They should have been annotative. All right, that was your version. Your version may not support annotated points yet. Annotative scale. Orphans linked. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. Let's see, doing setup. Box. If I just draw all my points. All right, now I set my scale to be 100. The labels go, the points don't until, let me see, I don't think it's a default. I can set for symbol names, automatic point numbers. Right here. So you have to do it in 2 different places. One is in this one in Carlson configure in general settings. Use annotated scale, support all drawing scales, and set to the drawings, set annotated to drawing scale. That's what changes this for you.
Okay.
When you run commands that create text, it makes them annotative. But in your points defaults, you can choose whether or not you want to use annotative points or not and support all drawing scales. Now, this is the one that makes it take more time. So now if I draw locate points, I'll draw them all. It's going to do the same thing. Let me see. I need to. So did you see how much longer it took to draw those points?
Yeah.
And so if I change my scale, see, there it is at 100. If I make it 50, which you should see. Now, did you see how the points changed size?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll set my, this time, let's make it 500. So you see, everything reacts because they are annotative, and it's changing the annotative scaling, including over here, of course. And what was I here? This was just at 100. There it is at 500. And that is at that same relative scaling as you saw over here. So in that sense, you can have it automatically change when you change scale, the point labels and the point symbols. Now there I'm at 60. So, I mean at 30. So if I go to 10, see how and it, of course, it resumed it, but if I make that 30, for instance. So that got, it needed to be bigger at 30. And now if I make it, say, 100, see, everything changes up, the point
Yeah.
symbol but it's, and it is the size that was defined here.
Okay.
Or when you do these annotations, this text size scaler for that. So 1/10 of an inch tall text to put those annotation defaults. Likewise, if you were to do something like on the center line, label your station and off, or well, you can do it there too. See, where would I find it? Below, here's my description, here's my station value. Right over here, my text size scaler, a 1/10 right there. So whatever number this is going to create that, and yet still create it as a piece of annotation, so that, you know, the only thing I may have to do now is to just reposition this. So if I move that up to there, and now if I go back to 30 scale, this is not, all right, so now that's 30. Back to 100, and it's back up there, 30. All right, so yeah, I get, you know what I think you have to do to get that to change it. Let me try this. Let's turn that off for a minute. Is if you grip move it. All right, so there it is at 30. I go to 10. And I'll put it up here. Let's say like there, so I can tell it's different. All right. So now if I change from 10 to 30, yeah, it's back here. If I change to 100, it should be up near the thing on bottom. And I go back to 10. It's going to be there. Yeah. Okay. So that note I had you take about selection anode display, turn it off so you don't get all those little thousands of little things. You can keep that in play. Oh, turn it off so it doesn't overcrowd your display.
Okay.
When you reposition this to take advantage of the different scale. So right now we're at 1 inch equals 10 feet. So at 1 inch equals 10 feet, if I want to reposition that, what was not sticking was when I issued a move command, you're going to have to do this with grips. So you select it and move it with grips. So at 1 inch equals 10, I'm going to say, I'm going to come down here to be on the underside of that line with that one. And I will be right there. So there it is for 1 inch equals 10. If, however, later I come along and say, you know what, I need this to be 1 inch equals 30. So now I'm going to take for 1 inch equals 30. I like where that one was. I'll just reposition it a little bit. And this one is way down here. I'm going to bring it up also, but I'm going to grip move it.
Okay.
It'll go on the outside right in there. So now, if I simply change it to 10, there they go back to there.
Okay. Yeah.
Change it to 30, and it should go back to these other positions like that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing you really need to do when those scales change, if you're using annotative elements, is just select it and grip move it. And you can do a rotation on it even if you want as well with a standard rotate.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you do with it. All right.
Okay.
So now that's the deal. Now with points, because you don't, I mean, you can try it and see. If you find that you don't, I don't have any idea about, the average number of points that you have in your drawing, whether you redraw points a lot. But if you do, and you see, I only had 5 points. But if I were to now I'm going to go ahead and I'll issue this command right now, points, draw locate points. Now watch how long it takes because I'm using annotated points. I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and click draw all. Now watch how long it takes. I clicked it and boom.
Yeah.
That's just with 5 points. So if you've got a drawing that's got hundreds of points in it, you might not want to do that with points. Now, what you can do, since you don't use points in your finished plats,
Right.
my recommendation would be to go to your points default. I'll go ahead and set this for you, and I would uncheck using annotative points,
Okay.
but leave this under general settings, use annotative scale. I would leave those on. That way your annotation and your text and all of that will be generated as annotative. And in fact, if I even do this, I think this is correct. I'm thinking out loud here. If I did that with an annotative style, but I'm going to go back and just select standard, which was non-annotative. but because we had our general settings, we say use annotative scale. I think it will go ahead and use our standard style called standard here. It's not annotative. I don't want to rename it. I just want to, there we go. So it's current. And so now if I annotate that, if I select it, yes, see, it goes ahead and makes it annotative anyway, even though the style is not annotative by default. So you don't even have to worry about setting a style to be annotative if you use annotative. And then that's at 30. So if I make this to be, say 60, there they are. And because I changed it to 60, it now has all of those different, see when I said support all scales? So they will be displayed no matter what annotation scale you choose. You'll always have that. If you don't want it to say support all scales, if you only want it to be the ones that you change to, then you would do this. And this might be the best, the most optimized to do is uncheck this. So we're not going to support all drawing scales. We'll just let it do the ones that we're using. And we'll do that here. We're now at 60. So if we do our varying distance here and here, and now if I look at that and I see it only has that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If, however, I say instead of 60, I make it 30. So they've now changed. And let's change it one more time to 10. And so now if I look at either one or all of them in my annotation scales, it only gets the ones that I change it to. I think that's going to be a better setting for you instead of having all that baggage. Now, here's the other thing. If you look at we looked at this list, and it's got all these things defined. That's because they were defined in the drawing template. Okay, so if I look at, is there one of these drawings here that one you're working on that I don't want to look at something that might be proprietary? Just
No, none of it's proprietary, nothing.
so just grab a
Any
drawing.
of them, yeah.
All right, so here's a drawing, and if I look at that drawing list, okay, it looks like you had the same thing. The thing is, if you have, all right, I'll tell you a better way to do that. And I won't save those changes. If I just do a new drawing and we won't use a template. So this is just a blank drawing. It should have, I'll just exit that. It should have like no layers, just layer 0. It has just standard as a text style. So very, very minimal drawing. Okay. If I look at the annotation scaling, oh, looks like they're mostly there anyway. All right. So sometimes you like, and because of your settings though, like, see if I look at this annotation scaling, see there is no 1 to 500 in
Yeah.
here, but you could, because we have that set up and linked, if I make this 500, Now it's added it to my list right up here.
Okay.
All right. And you notice this says 1 inch equals 500 feet instead of 1:500.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because when I said use annotation scale, set the annotative to the drawing scale, that's what changed it down here. But I've got this prefix and suffix defined. So it knew 1:500, but as the prefix, it's going to say, instead of that colon, it's going to say inch equals, and then for the suffix, it's going to have the foot mark.
Uh-huh.
So that puts it a little bit more so you can understand it here. But your ones that are predefined are right here. Okay, so
Okay.
they are there. Now you can edit this annotation scales list. If you choose this up here at the top, I'll double click down here and choose annotation scales list. You can take, and you see anyone that is in use is going to be green. The one that's current is checked. All of these others are not in use. They're just predefined. So, you could take, like there's a 1:16, for instance. You can delete that, take it out. You can delete, any number of those and take them out. Or you can modify them. Instead of 1:10, you could say 1 inch equals 10 feet. So it's 1 paper unit, 1 inch equals 10 drawing units, 10 feet.
Okay.
Okay. So now when I look at this, I've got 1:60, 1:500. That there's my what used to be 1:10, and I no longer have that 1:16. Okay. That 1:16 would be probably some type of an architectural scale.
Okay.
So to wrap that part up, and we don't need to keep this for anything, is that this stuff can be done. The points, and what I started to tell you, you saw how long it took to draw those 5 points.
Yeah.
Whereas if you ever need to, and you're changing scales, now we're at 1:10 here now. So you just can draw them all as long as you have this set to erase and redraw. Then it just redraws them that fast.
Okay.
Whereas before it has to create these with annotated blocks and stuff. It takes a little bit of time. So if you have, like I've done it for like 50 some points, and
Mhm.
a little progress bar down the bottom of the screen, it's a hassle. So
Mhm.
it may be something you want to do. Now, let's go back to, I'll let you open up a drawing maybe that you want to change for, and I'll show you what you can do with it.
Something I'm not working with.
Looks like you're staying busy.
That's a lot of time. That's not weekly. It's just, that's several years.
Yeah, well, I've got several years on mine too. I've got about one of your columns. But
Tell you what, let's grab shot.
now, before you do any wholesale changes here, do a save as and give it a new name just in case you need to go back.
Okay.
All right. So now, a couple of things. And I'm going to talk you through, you can do the changing. Your point text style has those squared off looking letters, but that may be okay. You may be fine with those. You don't need to worry about it. But if you needed to change it, it's that style, the text style, and it's called PTXT. And you can change that either by clicking that layers button, and then choosing text styles, or you can run the styles command from the draw text set style. So on the left is text styles. Right, you just passed it. Go down, right there. So now see that PTXT, and over
Yeah.
there, font name on the far right, you can change that to a different font that you might want to use. And it could be anything.
Tell you what, the one I like, because it's not as heavy as bold, is the IC Romans.
Okay.
Because when you make copies of the smaller stuff in Arial, it just becomes a blob.
That's true. That's true. So using the IC Roman S, Roman simplex, that's perfect. Yep. So now you close that dialog there, and or the layers box. Yeah, close that. And now you see how it's already changed them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now the other thing we talked about was that view resolution. So if you zoom in on a circle and it looks like a stop sign, if you don't want to see that all the time, you see now it will eventually resume or regenerate when it needs to. You saw that happen right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to have that happen, or if you got like long arcs in a road alignment or a property line, and you don't want to see it looking like segmented pieces, that variable is called view res, VIEWRES. No, VI.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. VI.
Yeah, view, VIEWRES. And just hit enter. And then tell it, yes, you want fast zooms. And then set the number up to 20,000. And hit enter. Okay, so now it won't do that. Now, let me tell you something about that variable. That's also something that's set here in your IntelliCAD settings. Let me see here a minute. I'm not sure where it's set. Maybe not there. Let me look one more place. Your options, let's see here. It should be a, yeah, I know where it is in AutoCAD. I'm not sure where it lives here. Well, doesn't really matter. But it is, it is available here under the V's. Well, except it doesn't show it. No, that's strange. Well, I thought it was going to list it there, and I'll show you that there, whenever you look at a variable, for instance, like world UCS, it tells you right in here when it is stored. In that case, if you were to set that, it's not something that's stored. Let's see, VS. All right, here's VS min.
Mhm.
That is the lower left corner of your current viewport virtual screen. That is stored with each drawing. If it's something that you set, like selection anno display, let's see if that is listed here. SE. Wow, that's strange. Well, see, they're alphabetical. You go up to the anno stuff and see if it's there. No. Well, anyway, normally it'll tell you if it's stored in the drawing or if it's stored in the registry. You only have to set it once and no matter which drawing. So if I
Okay.
type selection anno display, let me see. It's currently off. And if I hover the mouse, you see what I'm hovering over here?
Yeah.
And it says it's a registry system. So that means that it's something that stores in the registry. So you only have to set it once. So now if I look at view res, you see that's no longer, it's not a gear, it's a
Mhm.
command. So it stores in the drawing. Actually, that's a command. Let me see, what does that set? View res. See, there's your stop signs versus circles.
Mhm.
And apparently that's a command, but there is a view resolution there. Yeah, say, well, they treat it as a command. There in AutoCAD, that's a system variable, and it's something that stores with each drawing. So because it's stored with each drawing, and this same command behaves the same way. If I open up another drawing, it takes whatever that drawing is set at and reads that same variable and takes it based on that drawing. So if you're creating new drawings, you want to go into those drawing templates that you use
Uh-huh.
on that command and set it up to 20,000 and save it as a template so that any new drawings you create using that template will inherit that from that setting because
Okay.
it doesn't set there. All right. So we'll set that aside and move ahead. Now, so you've got a bunch of points and you've got some annotation and you've got a drawing scale of 1 inch equals 100 feet because, see, there it is. And that's because under general settings, we left it as use annotation scale and set it to the drawing scale. So that's good. So that sticks. Even when you open up an existing drawing, that sticks as well. So now you've got all of these different things. You got some annotation and you've got points. So one thing you can do for your annotation that's already there now is select one of them. Just click on it and select it. Now right click the mouse and choose select similar. Down toward the bottom. There you go. Now over in the properties, see where it says annotative? Go right there. Set that to yes. Well, no, change it to yes. Okay, now the paper text height right now is set to 0.07. So it's like a Leroy 70.
Mhm.
And if that's what you want, that's fine. Or you can make it, 0.1 or 0.08 or whatever you want your text to normally be when you plot it. All right, so 0.15. All right, so that's going to be 0.15. And now you can press escape to clear the selection. All right, so now go up and change your settings, change your scale from 100 scale to 50 scale. No, yep, right in settings menu. There, yep, oh, go back. Yep. Yeah, there it is. And change that from 100 to 50. I'll say okay. So you see how it changed. Now select one of them and let's look at its annotation scaling. And the properties. See the annotation scale says 1 inch equals 50.
Yeah.
And if you go over and click that, where it says 1 inch equals 50, there's a dot, 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 click on that. And you should see click on the dot, dot, dot.
Right. I don't see.
To the right of that.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go. So you see it had what it used to be and it had the one you just changed it to. So you press, so you can cancel that now or set okay, either one's fine. Now, if you change scales, no matter what you, and I don't mean, yeah, don't change it in the properties, go up into the settings and change your drawing scale. So set that to say 30 and you'll see that change again. So at 30 scale,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, see how it's redoes that. Now, if you go back to 100, you might have something that's a little too big. And I'll show you that, like you see, zoom in down in there. Yeah, see how it's sort of crowding down in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So you could rearrange those things to be, slightly different. To reposition them so that they're not over top of each other. So you just do it with a grip move. Yeah, so just move it, say down there.
The others don't overlap each other. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So now when you change, press escape so it's fix what you need. All right, so now when you change the scale up there in your drawing setup and you go back to say 50, see how they're back where they were?
Yeah. Yeah.
Switch it back to 100. See?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever, you may have to do some tweaks. Now, one thing, 0.15 might be a little big.
Yeah.
So again, select one and then do a right click, select similar. On down below, right there. Now go over to its 0.15, that's like, that's bigger than 1/8 of an inch. So I would set that to like 0.1 or 0.08. There you go. And now you can press escape to clear everything. And now you set your and you can put that back, where it needs to go. And all right. Now when you change your scale, you'll see and set it to anything you want, 40 or 10 or 20, I don't care.
Whoa. Okay.
All right. And then now because that text down below there, you see that this one that's right here, because
Mhm.
you moved it and then you changed the scale. So this one would need to be moved back, something like this, because that was a new instance of it. So it didn't know where you used to be at that scale.
Okay.
But then now when you change it back to 100, it's where you moved it the first time.
Okay.
And now anything else, if it has already been, and I think 50 already was, if I recall. What else did we have? Let me see over here. 20, 30, okay, 30. So back to 30. Well, yeah, and see,
20 to 30 wasn't that big of a difference. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could even do something like this, say, for these smaller ones.
Hmm.
So there it is at 30 versus, say, 50, which I would put, more like that. But all right, so there's it at 50. 30, we had it all together on one line down there. So, all right.
Yeah, good.
So that should give you a sense now. And now every time you do that, those pieces of text will reposition themselves will change their height and the height that they use, by the way, is if you don't have anything set right now, you've got symbols to be 0.08 and text to be 0.1. So, whatever you want those to be. And again, remember that's plotted inches at whatever scale you want to use. And in any of these setups, like annotation defaults,
Hmm.
your text size scalar, that scalar, or sometimes you'll see plot size. If you, any other command, let's see, point defaults has a, it's not in the defaults, it's in draw locate. And if you do this one, if you change these here, that will actually change it up here in your drawing setup. I think that's the only one that links back to it. I'm not sure. But if you do, let's do a, say, survey text, and you did your defaults for those, there's your text size will be 0.08. For your offsets and these are your building dimensions. These are your offsets for your ties, from the corners of the buildings to the property lines. It's only 0.04. So, you may want that to be bigger. A joiner text, a tenth.
Hold up a second. The survey text defaults. What is the survey text? I knew that once before, but I forgot.
Oh, okay, good. Well, let me show you. If we have we'll do a building for you here. Let's see. Whoop. Let's say that's a house. All right.
Hmm. Okay.
So you've got a couple of things with survey text. Now I'm at 30 scale. All right. So survey text is this. Let's look at, first of all, here's what they are. You've got offsets, buildings.
Okay. Yeah, that's the building offset from distance. Yeah.
All right.
Now I remember.
So now your defaults are simply right up here in the box that says building dimensions. Everything in that box says to use this. So 0.08. So my offsets use this layer, this style. And I would say you might want to bump that up a little bit. 0.04 is a little too small for most submittals. Now that offset text, if I follow that line all the way down, every bit of this right-hand side refers to those building offsets. And this down over here in the lower left is your adjoiners. And that's like, you just put in your adjoiner property owners and such. Right, so if you then do the building dimensions, I forgot to check the try that one time. Building dimensions, yeah, there's a drop trailer. Text on the inches. All right, that should be good. Is this closed? That should. I want it to label the whole building all at once. Auto placement, scale exterior. All right, and now building dimensions.
Yeah.
There they are. Now, again, once they're done, it's just text, so you can move along. And if you look at its properties, see, it is annotated. So going to 30 to 50, they're going to look bigger. See?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, 10 makes them smaller.
Yeah.
All right, so, oops. Let's go back to 30. And then same thing for the
I think you hit building dimensions.
oh, sorry. Oh, let's undo that. There we go. So now pick a building corner. There's the corner. And there's its offset.
Yeah.
And I repeat, go from here to here. And from here to here. Now, notice that label is always horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's controlled by in these offsets. Right now it says horizontal, but if I say parallel, and then I do the same command.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and there it is as an offset above the line, which is usually what you want. But you could even make that do instead of just parallel, you can have it. Let's see, where's the offset?
Offset from line, go up a little higher. Oh, down, 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 down. Right, one more.
Right there.
Yeah.
So if you made it like 0.04, if we made it like minus 0.02. Yeah, so
Yeah, put it in the line. Yeah.
yeah, so you can play with it like that.
Yeah.
Now I'll put it back for you as or the reason you usually want that is because sometimes this is so big and you're so close,
Yeah.
above. So anyway, so that's that. Now let's see. Joiner text. So when I picked that line, it knew which, how to rotate it.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's, but now these are two individual pieces of text. Again, now these though, that's interesting. They're not annotated. But because they're not, even though you're set it, now that should have been annotated. Those dimensions were. These are not, but now that you know, you can just look at their properties and make it annotated and make its paper text height, whatever you want it to do. And now when you change your scale, there's 30. And if we make it 60, see, they get bigger.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So now the other thing about a joiner text that I would recommend, do you use multi-line text? Are you familiar with that?
No.
All right, so that is, I'll show you down here, this little checkbox right here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I do that. That's all I use is a multi-line. I have trouble with standard.
Yeah, I'm like you myself. I prefer that all the way. So now if I do my joiner, pick a line, I'll do this one and I'll say, put it here. And it's gonna be Smith at Ux PB 111 page. So now that 405 come from tonight.
So that would work with any multi-line text I wanted to use.
And I see that it does create it as annotated.
Okay.
That's interesting. That's probably a bug in the program because when we set up here and told it to use annotated scale, that should have created those lines as annotated,
Hmm.
weren't. So just keep your eye on that. Sometimes they may have missed a few. I would like you, I would use multi-line text all the time. Now, if we change, now here's another nice thing about that, because they're not individual lines,
Hmm.
watch what happens, the difference.
Okay.
Spacing. You remember how the last one was over top of each other?
Yeah.
So that's another good reason to use multi-line text. And just take a peek at anytime you're doing something. Like here's your annotation defaults, for instance. See this use in text?
Hmm.
If you do it that way. Now, this one's for annotation. This is sort of on the fence about this one. Here's the deal, or here's the reason, because if you use in text and if you do your annotation so that you have it draw bearing over distance, then each of these is a separate piece of text. So that way you can move this independently, say down here to make it on the same line.
Okay.
if it's in text, it's always going to be one over the other. Now, but here's one thing you could do, however, maybe it's not so bad. If I say use in text, and if I say annotate, let's do bearing over distance. So there it is. It's now, it's in text, multi-line text. It is annotated. But let's say I wanted that to be on the same line. If you just double click it to edit it, and then stretch this out like this enough, and then I'm just going to backspace. Oh, wait a minute. Oh no, let me see. No, that's in text. Oh, it's two different pieces of in text. So that doesn't really bother it. So you can still move those independently. You can still do that.
Now for text, I go to draw multi-line text.
So, and that's just if you're labeling them together. But now, do you normally just draw your bearings and distances, or do you?
No, I usually annotate them from the
from
the
the
screen.
geometry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So
I'm saying for regular text, that's where I go to that one there. Yeah.
sure. And so if you're just doing that to that, and you set your height and width and all that, so that's probably good practice there. And I would take a look at all of these. Now, I don't know, do you ever do like auto annotate and do the entire?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep, so that'll do the same type of thing. Now, when this comes up, see, that sets your, now that's 1, 2, but it's all on that side of the line.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, you might want to do 1 above and then 1 below. Okay, or if you want them both above instead of 1 and, if you say 1 and 2, then it's 1, that's the first line, and then the second line, they're both above. And if you said below, now see how it does that? So you have to make sure that you have it what you want it to be. Now, all of that being said, let me see, is there a in text? I don't see. It's just going to get the in text from the generic defaults.
I wouldn't have done too much M text on that drawing. Now the finished drawing, I would.
All right. But I mean, even when you're using annotation to do that, it still can generate in text, so that's fine. All right. So the takeaway from all of that is simply use your, anytime now when you're creating things for the first time, now that you understand annotation, scan around those dialog boxes to make sure that whether or not you turn in text on, and double check those plotted text heights.
Okay.
That's really the thing to set. Now, notice this. See how nice and arranged to the line that is? Because that was created at this drawing scale of 30. Okay, and it's with this as a default. There's my offset. So I'm 1/10 of an inch off the line, and I'm 1/10 of an inch for the size of the text.
Yeah.
All right. So this, however, when it was originally done, when it's at 0.08, what was this? That was it. That may be 0.1. Yeah, 0.1. So when these were created, let me select all these and put them back to 0.1. Yeah, but you see how they're further off that line?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want them to all look like this and hug the line a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
then probably the easier thing or the better thing to do at that point would just simply go back and re-annotate. And I would put that as the first and below. Below. So now if you do those, it squeezes.
Yeah.
it down.
Go
You
demand,
don't-
yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to reposition them. However, if there's a whole pile of crap that you're doing, and if, I don't know, like if if you put like a bunch of general notes and surveyor certificates and all that, and then change the scale, then you got to go and change all that note stuff if you do it in model space. If you do it with a viewport, then this is only the part that looks inside the model. In fact, you can even, have it, shrunk up to only show certain things. And you can even, while you're here, you can do a twist screen to line up with, like it is there.
Mm-hmm.
Put north, that's north down this way, which is not good form, I understand. But see, what that's done though, is it's not, we didn't rotate any of that. It just, the way it shows up on the paper. And then you can go over here and just in paper space, put your general notes and your scale and your title block information. And when you create that text, it's always created at your plotted inches. You would, set your text heights and all
Okay.
of that.
All right.
Okay. So just sort of keep your eye on those kind of things, and find out if you've got, if the only thing you've got to rescale are these annotations like this, and if they are, if they were originally created at a different scale,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to change this gap, because unless you go back and move them closer. And that's because that offset got computed and created at whatever the scale was. So when this was, I don't know. Yeah, see, that looks nice there.
Yeah.
And you see now this is probably a little, I don't know if it's too tight or not. It's smaller than this. This
Yeah.
looks acceptable. This is a little closer. So, it's going to be a situation of, first of all, if I'm going from 30 to 50, I don't really think there's going to be enough to worry about tweaking.
No.
If I'm going from 100 to 10, then you're going to have to do some tweaks and stuff. And you can do those with those grips, or if it's easier, let's say if this were a closed polyline all the way around the boundary and you auto annotate it, it will do everything with just one click.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes the original and moves it. Okay. And you've got, you can obviously, when you get things like that, and because you have linking on, that goes with it. Okay. And that is a setting. Here this says link labels with line work.
Yeah.
That's what, when that line work changes, if you created that label based on an annotation of that line, when that line changes, it will recompute and redisplay. So it's exactly the same as if you just said, if you did a re-annotation of it.
Will it recompute the distance too?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay.
There's 126, 149,
Okay.
originally 317.56. All right. Now that it does that, it will if you compute the area, square feet, acreage, and whatever of a closed polyline, and you move those lines, it will recompute and redisplay those as well. I'm not sure on, let's see. Not sure about. Not sure about those. Let's see, that's 65.8. Let's just make it. Yeah, no, that then you just have to re-annotate.
Okay, no problem.
I think, I don't think it, yeah, so you'd even have to erase those other ones.
Mhm.
All right. All right, so that gives you a little bit of stuff to
Excuse me.
try to play around with. Now, we didn't do any, I didn't change any geometry that I did not undo back. And I erased all those other sample things. The only thing really you need to worry about on these is repositioning these if you wanted to save this or not, or go back to your others. You can welcome.
Just go back to the other.
Yeah, so anyway, that is about the extent of that annotation scaling.
A lot to play with.
Yeah, I think so. So now, Charlie, let me ask you, I know you've been to some classes in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and I had another fellow, like, and I think it might have been him, but it might have been you as well. I don't recall. Do you play a mandolin?
No,
Okay,
no.
it was the other guy. He was from somewhere up north of here, up in, I don't know, Mercer County, PA, somewhere, I think, or maybe Franklin County, maybe up that way. But he came to class one day. I don't know. Are you a musician at all?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
couldn't carry a tune in a bucket.
All right. Well, he found out apparently that, I play guitar and mandolin and all that, but he brought down the most beautiful Collings. It's the brand name Collings. It's, the man's name that makes them.
Mm-hmm.
He's a luthier. He makes guitars and mandolins, and it's like the pinnacle of
Wow.
those instruments. It was like this mandolin, and about how small a mandolin is.
Yeah, yeah.
That thing probably cost a good $6,000 or $7,000.
Wow.
So it was just gorgeous.
Woo.
So and I haven't talked to him in a while. He may have actually been in a class with you. Oh,
I don't recall anybody talking about a mandolin in our classes.
well, he may not have talked in that class, but he did, and he's been to several, and he brought one down. But I think he and you might have been in one of those early classes. His name was something SOU or STOU something. Trying to think of his last name. Well, it doesn't matter. I can think of it offhand. I was just trying to remember, because I couldn't remember if it was him or if it was you.
Definitely wasn't me.
All righty. Well, if you're not going to sit on the porch and play mandolin, at least pour yourself a bourbon and have a cigar.
Well, I'll go with the bourbon. I'm not a cigar smoker, but okay.
Oh, all right. Well, little Jim Beam, as they say, you want a glass of water? He says, no, man, water's for bathing.
Yeah.
Pickles for drinking. So, all right, sir. Anything else?
Not for today. Let's get you paid.
Well, I'll send you invoice for that for,
Okay.
we start at 1, so we'll have what, 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
2
2 3/4.
You can take care of that when you get a chance. There's no
2
rush.
3/4. Okay, 2 3/4 hours. So we'll go from there. And I know.
No, Charlie, we'll make it 2.5 because we talked about mandolins and stuff. So, I only build to the half hour.
Okay. You're not like the attorney that building 6-minute intervals, are you?
No, I don't do that. I've worked for people that did.
That's an attorney Yeah, I went to see an attorney once. I charged in 6-minute intervals. Okay, great
Oh,
for you.
wow. Yeah, no, not me. Let me make sure, let's see, I think, just let me double check here. Yeah, Charlie and, yep, I got it all.
Okay.
1218 Swearingen Road. Yep.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we still got the CE class coming up.
Yeah, you know what? When is
What?
that?
That should
That is
be
going to be on
September 16th.
August, September 16th.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so that gives him time. I think, right, yeah, right now you're the only one signed up for it again, but tell you what, because I mean, we lose money doing it for one.
No, I understand. So there's no
person.
problem. There's no
Well,
rush.
but I don't want to keep putting you off and off and off and off and off.
Well,
So,
frankly, Ken, I'm using the equipment right now. My questions would be not that many. So don't worry about it whenever we get to it.
well, I'll tell you what, when we get to it, if they happen to cancel that class again, call me back and ask me specific questions. We won't necessarily go through the whole class. It might be stuff that you've already figured out. So
Okay. All right.
we can do, you and I can do a separate Zoom session on that if you'd like.
That sounds like a good possibility, but and
Okay.
keep it open because I'm sure I'm going to be back for asking more questions because
Yeah.
I hate Windows. I love DOS.
Yeah. Well,
Gee, I kept doing.
well, I'm like you. I hate Windows, but I use a Macintosh. I'm actually running
That's
Carlson.
right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyway, but be that as it may, well, like I said, it looks like you've got some good things started here.
Yeah. We're there. Yes. It is going to help a lot.
Yeah,
So
and
I'll be back.
listen, and anything like you're working on stuff, the next week or so as you go over. Now, I'm going to send you a link to the recorded video
Okay.
for this session. And in fact, you'll probably get the link before it's even finished processing. The link gets generated. I'll send you that. Just give it an hour or so to let it finish
Okay.
on the processing side. But now they're unlisted. I've got, gosh, several hundred recorded videos on my Carlson channel. But they are for individuals or classes that people, I think I sent you maybe one before that I did with Mike Shep.
Yeah, we did yeah, I had one or two of Mike's. Yeah.
Yeah. So I normally, those are all, they're in what's called, they're in a state of what's called being unlisted. So if you go and join my Carlson channel, you won't see any of those listed. But when I send you the link to one or others, then you can click on the link and you'll get to it. You'll be able to see it that way because you have the link to it.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah. And then once you do that, and again, it's a YouTube thing. And once you have it from the link, then just add it to one of your save lists, one of your playlists, and it'll always be there. Okay.
Great. Very good, sir.
All right. And so in the next coming week or weeks or however long you're doing, as you're working with this annotation stuff, if something doesn't behave itself or you're not sure what it does, don't hesitate to call me, because if it's a 10-15 minute thing, that's a freebie kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it could be something I can pop a real quick email to me with a question, and
Okay.
and I'll pop you a real quick email back. If it gets into multiple hours and stuff, we'll need to set up another
I
session.
understand. Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, my friend, you take care. Be good. I will end our I'll end the share. I will stop the recording.